Hey, everyone. Welcome to Locked On Lakers for Wednesday. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky. Is Bronny James making demands? That's next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers first listen of every day, Monday through Friday, no matter how or where you get your podcasts. This one's always free, never behind a paywall, and Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go hang out with over 24,000 subscribers, Andy, all of whom are wondering just how this Bronny James situation got so weird, because before it was like totally normal, and now it's gotten very strange. We'll get to that in a second. Do want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Do know that terms apply. Get into a couple other mailbag things, Andy, that we did not get to for Tuesday's show. Do want to encourage everybody to continue leaving questions on the YouTube page, on the community section, in the comments themselves at Cam Brothers on YouTube. We definitely want to keep using those throughout. Little Taurean Prince free agency news. That's a thing. We might get to that today, but we'll see. And of course, the Sixers. Are they another team chasing LeBron James? But let's start with Bronny. This on the heels of a weekend of the like stuff we didn't get to, Andy, about like what kind of contract Bronny would be willing to sign and all that kind of stuff. Tuesday, the news about Bronny James got, in my mind at least, a little weirder.
I think a lot of it depends on how you interpret some of this, but either way, first, the news itself, per Charania of The Athletic, the Suns are going to be working out Bronny James ahead of the NBA draft, which in and of itself is interesting because they have the number 22 pick. I'm not sure that they have others. I know that they are low on picks between now and like 2070 for the almost in perpetuity. But what's interesting about it is, according to Shams, Bronny James is only going to work out for a couple of teams. The Lakers and the Suns are the only two that he named that he's expected to work out for. He's had other workout invitations, according to Shams, over 10, but that for the time being, it's just going to be Phoenix and the Lakers for workouts, but also that the Phoenix Suns are giving serious consideration to the idea of drafting Bronny James with the 22 pick. For those unaware, there are 30 teams in the NBA, which would mean they are drafting him in the first round with the idea that that would be the bait used to lure LeBron James from the Lakers, who would opt out of his contract with the Lakers, join the Suns as a free agent, making a veteran's minimum, and then you have a big 4.5 over in Phoenix with LeBron, Bradley Beal, Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, and Bronny James.
Use of Nurkic.
Nope. He is at
statistically, Nurkic was more of a part of the big three last year than Bradley Beal was.
Whatever.
Noting, but
this is about star power, baby, and star power. Yusuf Nurkic is, and I think this is actually accurate, he is below Bronny James. That's actually accurate.
Depends where on the planet.
Other than one specific country, the headline stack is going to go towards Bronny James before it goes to Yusuf.
Yeah, that's true. The algorithm would favor that.
Let's not overthink this. Bronny James is more of a headline right now than Yusuf Nurkic.
It's weird to me, like the 180 hit, and I say this and probably everything that I'll say for the next 3 weeks, at least, with the predicated with the idea that it is silly season. Like it's silly season part 1, silly season part 2 coming when free agency starts, like right before that. But the 180 in the tone of the news around Bronny, which is, treat me like I'm my own person, like, good workouts, moving his way up. worked his way back into the second round. Good story with this, to a guy who, at the very least, based on the kind of reporting that Shams did on Tuesday, is treating himself like he's a top level pick. In theory,
in theory, I think there's a
potential smokescreen going on here, and I think we probably are both thinking of the same kinds of things. But on the surface, at least, the idea that Bronny wouldn't go work out for 8 other teams and is only going to work out for 2, on its face, you could certainly look at that and say, ooh, here's a guy who thinks, because this is the sort of thing that higher draft picks do. Like the guys who are expected to be, picked in the, the top 4 or 5 typically won't work out for somebody drafting 10, 11, 12, 13, because they don't want to give the impression that they might fall that far. So it is granted, both the Lakers are 17 and then 55, and then the Suns are 22, and that's all, folks. So it's a different situation. But the idea that he wouldn't work out for other teams, we'll see if it holds, but just on its face, that projects something different than what they were doing, 2 weeks ago at the combine.
Well, I think it depends on the way you look at it, because one interpretation could be like what you're talking about. Bronny James, or at the very least, Team Bronny James, is feeling themselves and therefore setting very specific parameters for these workouts, who he will or won't work out. The other way of looking at it is they are getting ahead of the idea that they're not going to find a situation that he likes. He's going to either end up going back to school somewhere, or maybe playing in the G League, playing overseas,
can
whatever.
Go back? When can, what are the rules now? When can you go back to school even after the draft?
Well, I think you have a certain, I'll put it this way. He has not, I think, lost his college eligibility now. I think you can work out for teams and still go back to college.
I know the rules are much more different than they used to be. I just don't, I haven't kept track.
But for the time being, he still has maintained that eligibility. He obviously could go to the G League. He could go overseas. But if you limit the amount of workouts, you also could be preventing bad buzz. Because if you start working out for multiple teams and the buzz isn't good, then all of a sudden you're setting up more noise for yourself that isn't good, regardless of where you end up going. But either way, I think there can be something strategic about this that I would read into as, if nothing else, there's more of a possibility here than just Bronny's gone Hollywood and is making demands.
It's certainly possible. It's, there's the same kind of thing.
Especially considering, really quick, he seems to be making it pretty clear he wants to be judged on his own merits.
That's my point, is that you take what he was saying at the combine and how LeBron has been treating this stuff and all that, since really, really walking back a lot of the hype, I would say, that LeBron himself had wittingly or unwittingly put on his son. After the break, there's another example of what you're talking about that came out over the weekend that gets into this. But we also need to discuss whether or not the Lakers are seriously considering this, or ought to seriously consider taking Bronny James with one of their picks, or buying another pick in the second round or something like that to try to get him. And then, too, what this means for other teams trying to go get LeBron and lure him away from the Lakers. We'll get to all of it next.
Locked On Lakers is brought to you by Game Time. When I was around 12 years old, the Police, my all-time favorite band, they were on the Synchronicity Tour, and they were the biggest band on the planet at that time. So this was a really difficult ticket. I couldn't get seats, but at the time I was like, no big deal. Just catch the next Police tour. And they ended up breaking up. So I eventually saw Sting, and he was really good, but it's not the same thing as the Police. So I learned from that experience, when it comes to a concert you want to see, Carpe Diem, do not miss out. That's why I love Game Time. It's the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy shows, and theater near you. And with killer deals on last-minute tickets and the best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets, start getting hyped for the fun. They got flash deals where you can save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or the event. The Game Time guarantee means you always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section or row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. It is the fastest growing ticketing app in the country for a reason. So snag the tickets without the stress using Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
So more things, Andy, that can be filed away in the, what does it mean? It may not mean what it looks like it means. Bronny James reportedly, Camp Bronny put out the word that he would only take a regular NBA contract, not a two-way.
This was Rich Paul on the record, by the way.
Right. That this is how they were doing it. And that could be seen as a guy dictating the terms of how he's going to get into the league. It could also be something that in the end may not be followed through on, but is trying to put pressure on teams to actually draft him and take him, as a second round pick and all that stuff, as opposed to thinking that you can get him, as a UFA or after the draft by like dangling a two-way or something like that. Like this is, I think that could easily be seen as a sort of posturing thing to try to improve his draft position to make sure he's selected, as opposed to having to kind of fight through and navigate that space. But I think at the very least, Phoenix is trying to feel out whether or not Bronny is a viable path to LeBron, because, and it's kind of clever. On the one hand, you could say, Andy, it is absolutely insane for the Suns to use a draft pick on Bronny, given their roster situation, given their draft situation, given all of those things. It is nuttery, I think you could argue, to use the pick on Bronny. The flip side is the chances of the 22nd pick in the draft helping them in material ways is probably relatively small. Like, guys come in, they do stuff. We saw it this year, Pajemski and Jaime Jaquez, and, it can happen for sure.
Bunch of guys that fans wish the Lakers took,
for example. But generally speaking, those guys usually take a couple years to make a big impact. The flip side of that is if you think you can leverage that pick and turn it into LeBron James, that's better than any draft pick you're going to have. It's better than any free agent signing you're going to have. It's better than any possible move that a team like the Suns could make with their cap sheet. And so is it going to work? I don't think so, but it's absolutely 1,000% worth exploring and kicking the tires and seeing if there really is, if you dangle this out, there really is some kind of possibility that you could do it. Because there's no earthly way that Bronny James would normally be drafted at 22, as far as I can tell, based on every mock draft and all this other stuff.
No,
I'm not saying he can't be an NBA player. I'm just saying he would not be the 22nd pick. At least not without doing a great job in a bunch of workouts.
Well, I would say if he really wants to boost himself up to the 22nd pick under any circumstances that don't involve his father, he probably needs to work out for more than two teams.
Correct. So two teams, one of whom his dad doesn't ostensibly play for.
He got a promise at 22 and 55.
Right.
Just the way things typically go.
Exactly. So, I mean, I get it from Phoenix's perspective, and like how much of this is just Ishbia being Ishbia,
Wishbia,
or versus like real strategic thinking. I mean, maybe there two things can be true at once, but I don't blame them for trying, because if you can get LeBron, you are both supercharging your off season and also crippling the Lakers, it should be noted. And then you look at the Sixers, like the Sixers, for example, or I guess Orlando, could come at this from a much more conventional approach. Like, there's the threat of Bronny going to Phoenix and that being the lure, and I guess playing with that group of guys. I'm not sure how much of an attraction that would be, as opposed to going to, say, Philly and playing with Embiid and Maxey. That's where I would go. But like, they can do it with money if LeBron opts out. They can't give him as much as the Lakers can, but they can give him a lot. They can give him, 40, I think it's low 40s, high 30s, low 40s, something like that. But they can pay him well and not make him take the sort of haircut that LeBron has never, I understand why, but never shown a willingness to do.
Not since Miami. He did do a little bit in
Right,
Miami, but not since then.
But that wasn't a veterans minimum type thing.
No,
that was a slightly below value kind of deal. This would be Miami pays him as much as, Philly pays him as much as they possibly can. It's just going to have to be less. So of those two things, I would think actually the Philly threat, if he opts out and there really is some sort of friction, or I don't mean delay, like the minute he opts out, he's got to re-sign another deal. Like, that could happen that way. But if it takes a week, I don't necessarily think that's a bad sign. I don't think that means the thing is falling apart. But of the two, I think that is a more compelling threat, because, the money's there and he would be joining a decent team in a easier conference to go win a title.
It is an easier conference. I do think the one caveat with joining the Sixers is you're always worried about Embiid getting hurt. Actually, because then all of a sudden it's you and Tyrese Maxey and a bunch of nobody better than what you have in LA.
Yeah.
The last thing because obviously this is going to keep developing. We're going to keep hearing more stuff. But the part about this that I find most compelling is actually, unless Bronny is just really playing things coy because he doesn't want to seem like an unproven rookie trying to Bigfoot his, determined future in the NBA, it feels like this is the exact opposite of what Bronny wants. Like, there have been no indications whatsoever that Bronny actually wants this team up. If anything, there have been more indications with the few comments Bronny's made that it isn't what he wants. And I just feel like a setup where they take him in the first round just to get dad. If I am Bronny, I tell my dad, please don't. And if I'm LeBron, and I don't want to tell him how to be a father because he is by all accounts a very good one, but I just feel like you're setting up your son to potentially look really bad, and you create that much higher of a bar for him to clear in order to forget just being respected, not just be resented. Like, there is resentment.
At 20, if he's at 22, at 17, if he's taken there, I think if he comes in at 55,
sure,
that's a different deal.
That's the cost of doing business. Fine, whatever.
Right. Also, too, it's like, there are guys who are drafted in the 50s who are bigger projects than Bronny theoretically might be. So it's like that. To your point, I think that is the biggest argument for Bronny's career against any kind of plan that takes him in the first round without him earning.
I highly, highly question. And again, I preface this by saying I have not gotten to know LeBron well during our time covering him, and I've never met Bronny. But based off what we have seen and based off the way Bronny is widely perceived, I just feel like this is a bad way for him to enter the league if he really wants to carve out the identity that he seems to.
Assuming, by the way, that any of this posturing is more than that. Like, there's a lot of meat behind this in terms of really trying to dictate the terms of how he ends up in the NBA. So coaching questions that we did not get to for Tuesday's show. These holiday weekends really throw me off. They didn't get to for Tuesday's show, plus a little Taurean Prince news next. So Taurean Prince was on with our friend Trevor Lane, Lakers Nation, had an interview with him and asked him about his free agency and all that. And then not unexpectedly, Prince said that he would like to return. His focus is on returning. This, I guess, would feel like a controversial thing for a lot of fans. I would have no problem with the Lakers, assuming the money wasn't crazy or anything like that.
Well, there's a limit to what they can offer him, so
Right.
it won't be crazy.
But you know, do you have to go all the way to the top of what you can give him, and so on and so on? I don't have a problem with bringing Prince back, and I think you can make a pretty strong argument that they should.
I mean, just to clarify, I believe the highest they can offer him is $5.3 million. Other than the idea of what gets them to the first apron, second apron, you know, like $100,000 here or there couldn't matter. As far as bringing Taurean Prince back, absolutely, I think it could be a good idea. I mean, once he was slotted correctly, Taurean played well. And even during a lot of the season when he was playing too many minutes, the problem was Darvin's usage of him, not Taurean. They could do much worse than bringing him back.
The other interesting nugget from that interview was Trevor asked him about Darvin, and while Taurean, said, it's good, close to Darvin, he's going to be just fine and all that kind of stuff, and call him a good friend and so on and so on. He didn't really do that thing that you'll often hear pros do, where they say, like, I feel bad because, like, the coach was doing everything he was supposed to do, we failed and all that. He didn't get into any of that. So as somebody who you would probably think is probably as good of an ally as Darvin has on that roster, to not get a hard defense of Darvin's work and really kind of go to bat for the guy. I don't want to read too much into it. That would be unfair, because it's not like Prince is a giant bombastic personality that's just throwing. He's not Draymond, but I thought that was interesting that he didn't necessarily do that thing that you often see players do. Speaking of coaches, Andy, we dip back into the mailbag. Both Michael AS007 and John Sotelo 8652 ask essentially versions of the same question. I heard JJ Redick didn't give a single vote to AD for all defensive team. Is this true? If so, how are the Lakers and AD seeing Redick as the best candidate when he doesn't properly recognize the Lakers' best players' strengths? Another version of that, another part of that this time from John. Were I AD, I'd be pissed and wouldn't want that guy as my coach. Is this a thing? Because it has been reported, and as far as I know, that is correct. Redick
it is 100% correct.
Did not have him on his ballot. Is that a problem as they do these sorts of things, whether relationship wise, or would you think less of Redick's ability to evaluate what's going on?
As far as the relationship end of it, I'm assuming it's not an issue, because if AD was that offended by it, I would think Redick is out of the running for this job. And let me just clarify right now, if AD is that offended and Redick is not out of the running, they seriously need to blow out this front office and bring in new people. Because if you are actively hiring a coach that your star player is upset with, that's a terrible, terrible process, particularly when it seems like you're going out of your way not to interview other people. Like, you're basically doing the coaching search version of how Bronny's doing his workouts. Like, you're limiting it to very few based off what could be interpreted as unearned confidence. So I'm assuming AD has taken little enough offense to this that it's not a thing. As far as, what does it say about Redick and his evaluation of basketball defense, blah, blah, blah? Nothing. I mean, in all honesty, it's like, does he know how to use AD? If he knows how to use AD, I don't think it really matters if he thinks 10 players had a better defensive season than him or not. It matters, does he know how to use Anthony Davis in the most effective way possible? I mean, in all honesty, I don't think it matters.
Yeah, I mean, guy, and like, did he? I don't know if he forgot.
I think Redick is wrong.
Are his criteria for these awards different? I mean, he's going to be asked about it. I mean, that will be one of the things that comes up in the press conference. Like, hey, why didn't you give AD a vote? And I'm sure he'll have a good answer that doesn't involve, I just don't think he's that good. He's got some work to do on that side of the ball. I'm sure he has a reason that, or if he doesn't, he will. By that time, it's, I look at record, I looked at this, I looked at that, or whatever it might be. But it's kind of an interesting question, just in terms of like the politics that go into questions like this, and like, who do you hire and all this kind of stuff. It gets to another one that we haven't really even discussed. This from Superman UI 6XL, which I believe is his birth name. Who is your top three? He has his in order, I assume, Borrego, Cassell, and Redick, followed by Adelman and Norrie. Or maybe that's just the order he listed them and wanted to know which ones we thought. But like, do you have a preferred order? And don't feel bad if you don't. It's not punting the question, because I don't either.
Well, I'll tell you, I had been giving this a lot more thought in terms of preferences. And when I had been giving it more thought, I had Adelman and Norrie higher up, in part because they had been with very successful teams. And, both of them had spent time with Michael Malone and, been part of successful builds in Denver and, with Tim Connolly and things like that. And also both of them, between the time with Jokic and the time with Karl Anthony Towns, Rudy Gobert, Naz Reid, like, they've had success working specifically with big men. So I thought that was really important with Anthony Davis. But if I'm being honest, as more time has gone along, I've been giving this less and less thought, because it just seems like they're trying to situate the best calendar day to announce that they've hired JJ Redick. So why should I be giving this more thought than they are?
Well, it's the thought process. I mean, because we've talked a little bit about this, but like, the everydayers certainly understand. Like, I don't have, like insider information about exactly who the best assistants are in the league. I think that those are things that even league insiders struggle with to try to diagnose exactly, because there are so many things. I've seen criticism, for example, of James Borrego's offense that he helped with in New Orleans, and like the types of play calling, and it's too simple and this and that. To some, sometimes things happen on the floor for reasons that are unrelated to what a coach would do under different circumstances. Different players, you might call things differently. You might have players with different skill sets, different aptitude for running certain things. And so you have to work with what you've got. And so what you see in situation A may not be what you get in situation B. What I'm really interested in is the why. I think I am inclined broadly to pick somebody like Adelman, who has, that great coaching pedigree, has been an assistant for a long time, very well respected, a lot of success. And, he's a first-time head coach, but not a first-time coach. I think he would have a much easier time building a staff than somebody like Redick would. I'm inclined for somebody like that. But what I really want to find out is the why. If they go with Redick over somebody like Adelman, why? What about him is, makes them feel that the potential is there? How do they feel that he's going to overcome this question of a lack of experience? Where do they think they're going to get the top level assistance that he is undoubtedly going to need, that any of these guys would need? And so that's the part that I'm really interested in. And we won't know that until after they've made a hire.
Yeah. And look, someone like, I've mentioned this before, Sam Cassell had intrigued me for a while, just because while I don't know exactly what he would implement system-wise, philosophy or whatever, I do know that he has been putting in a lot of work. He's been a part of some successful teams. He was a very successful player, and he is somebody with a lot of gravitas, a lot of personality, a lot of swag, who is a really smart guy, very great basketball mind. I think a really good communicator. He's always been a leader everywhere he's gone, even though he's really never been the best player on his team. He's always been one of the leaders. and he's somebody that would not be intimidated coaching LeBron and AD.
No.
But again, as time has gone on, to be honest, I have been giving this less and less thought because it just seems like the Lakers are trying to figure out, with, I don't know, the NBA and ESPN, like when is the time where we can make this hire that'll make everyone happy?
Yeah.
Like, it's just what it feels like.
I will say too, like, I think, it is reductive to say that there's no question strengths of Sam Cassell, all the things that you talked about, and his ability, he may not have been the best player, but always a damn good player. Did he make an all-star team, or was
he made both an all-star and an all-NBA team?
Right. So, I mean, he's been
and he won 3 championships.
Right. He is that caliber player, even if he's not a Hall of Famer or whatever. Really good
really
player.
Good.
He understands both ends of this as a role guy and as a star on a team. His gravitas and his communication ability, I think, would be one of the main attractions, but it would be unfair to him to assume that there's not a lot of X's and O's behind that as well.
He was a point guard in the league for like 15 years or something. Mm-hmm. He clearly understands how schemes and stuff like that work. I just don't have any idea of what it would be.
Absolutely.
That's all.
I've seen that as a thing. Like, I've even seen a couple comments from different places. You see, so he's too much like Ham because he's a relationships guy and I don't know if the vibes or whatever it is, gravitas, that kind of thing, like handle the locker room as opposed to the basketball side of things. So I want to discover what the process is, because I'd be lying if I said I knew enough to say that Nori is a better choice than Adelman, who's a better choice than Quinn, who's a better choice than JJ Redick. Like, there's just no way for me to know that. But there is a way for us to evaluate the process. And it says a lot about the front office. Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you're going to hang out with over 24,000 subscribers, all of whom are wondering the same things about the next Lakers coach that we are. We will see everybody tomorrow.